All right, so everyone, our next presentation is going to be Modeling Patterns Override, presented by Quantrix lead engineer Ben Wake. So without any further ado, let me hand it right over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Brendan, and welcome everybody. This is going to be a more technical presentation. I'm going to do a demo about formulas and how to handle a certain specific situation that both I and other customers that I've seen often end up in. Um, my name is Ben Wake. As Brendan said, I'm a lead engineer here for the Quantrix Modeler Desktop program. And I know many of you already. And without any further ado there, I am going to step into this presentation. I'm not really a PowerPoint kind of guy, but I made a quick PowerPoint to sort of a quick slide here to get us started, to sort of motivate this particular topic of conversation. So this is very similar in a lot of ways to the thing that Brad showed off earlier that's coming in 22.2, where you can delete a formula but leave the values around. It is often the case that users have data that they like, data they want to keep, data already in their cells, but they want to be able to edit. They sort of want their cake and eat it too. These default values could come from data import. They could be just typed in by that user or by another user, or they could be, as in the case of this particular demonstration, calculated. Bear in mind that everything I'm talking about here is not specific to calculation. Your default values can come from anywhere. With the current architecture of Quantrix Modeler, and I suspect it will remain this way, it is not possible to make the same cell be calculated and an input cell. It would be difficult to understand what was going on there. However, what we can do is use the power of the isEmpty function and a simple if statement to combine an input range and a pre-populated range, such as a calculated range or a data import range. So I am going to, at this point, assuming I can figure out how, drop my slideshow and bring up my demonstration model. So I thought I would do something here that I hoped would be relatable to people without necessarily getting into any particular sort of business jargon or anything like that. So what I have here is a made up, really simple personal budget. Every month, I'm going to spend some amount on rent and groceries and gas, etc. And the amount that I'm spending changes, but it tends to change in sort of predictable ways. As of a certain date, my rent hypothetically was only $500 a month. Gosh, I wish. However, the next year, my landlord doubled my rent because, and so I want to be able to record that data in a really sort of tidy, simple way, and then pull it into a more standard looking system. Like here. I'm not going to go over right now how this formula works. This is just sort of the setup. This is where we're starting from. This is our data. This is our pre-populated data. And so when you look at this, it is doing what you might think here. So for instance, let's just look at rent. It says that in 2020, starting in January, 500. So all of these are filled with 500s. But if I look at 2021, then it goes up to 1,000. There. And similarly, you can see that in February of 2021, I decided to stop spending so much darn money on groceries or whatever. So, all well and good. I'm happy with this. I like this. But I discovered that it doesn't really meet every single one of my needs. Maybe it turns out that I have guests coming, say in June of 2020, and I expect to spend a lot more on groceries. They just eat a lot. At the moment, I don't have any good way to handle that problem. I could go into here and I could move this stuff over and I could put in a range that is for 1 month and then another range that knocks it back. But that's just a messy way to do it, and it doesn't work for a lot of real world scenarios. So in practice, what I really want to do is add the ability to sort of point override each of these values. And the way I'm going to do that is with Quantrix's most powerful tool. I'm going to add a dimension. I'm going to hold down Shift, so I add it on the inside. You don't have to do that. You can just drag it. But I'm going to call this the by range version. And I'm going to adjust my formula, which I've already written down, as you see, to only calculate by range because I'm going to add new items. I'm going to add an item called result that I'll populate in a second. And again, using Shift, I'm going to add an item called input. And the idea is that anything I put in input, I want to end up in result. But if I don't put anything in input, I want to use the by range. So again, whatever I said, June 2020 groceries, more money. Let's say 400. Obviously, right now, result isn't doing that. But once you have the framework in place, and assuming you know the existence of the method, it's actually pretty easy to populate. I'll say result equals if is empty, input, then I want to use by range. Otherwise, I want to use input. And that is, in a nutshell, the basic override pattern. I'm sure many of you have used similar things, but to me, this is an extremely powerful technique. Suppose somebody covers my rent this month, and so I don't have to spend anything on it. Boom, you saw that this changed immediately. And just to sort of drive this point home, I'm going to build a little chart here to show this off. Let's grab a line chart and let's slap that up in here. Look at result. That's not where I meant to drag that. So this makes it really clear what's going on. I'm going to, or at least it does to me, I'm going to remove my overrides for the moment. And you can see that the way the by range is working is it is this until it changes. It is this until it changes, and then it's that. And so just to show the chart, in this case, I'm going to grab a little more real estate here. Just to show the chart, I'm going to say, okay, what if I increase my gas expenditure in, I don't know, May of 2021 to $160 a month? Then here you can see that gas, which is in yellow, in May of 2021 jumps up to 160. But then I can also go and say, okay, sure, but also in 2021, in July of 2021, my car was in the shop and I only spent $50. And then you can see it dip down there. So you get an instantaneous response here, and that is the basic override pattern. So I'm going to move on to a more advanced version of this same pattern. So I'm going to bring my stuff back up here. And much like Brad with the cooking show, here's one I prepared earlier. So the idea here is I'm going to copy all of these values and remove them. I'm going to put them back in a second. But the idea here is I've sort of combined together the equivalent of the by range and the result into one formula. You can make it explicit. Sometimes that's really nice. you can also combine the two of them together. The idea here is that what I want to do is spread out 100% across all available places. But what I want to do is say, okay, I want to explicitly say that half of whatever it is I'm spreading here is in July, and have all of my remainder be spread across all of the remaining values. And maybe, I've already allotted 75%, so each of these months has very little, but they all have an even amount. And so here I'm going to just sort of paste in my pre-prepared inputs and talk about how this formula works. Here I'm using is blank instead of is empty. Just so you're aware, there is literally no difference between these two methods. They're just different skins on the same thing. We wanted to make sure that a user who went looking for looking for it with one of those names found it. So this part should look very familiar. If the input value is blank, then we're going to calculate it somehow. Otherwise, we're going to use it, right? So that's the basic portion of the override pattern. And then the specific detail here, the sort of special sauce is, how much am I allocating? Well, I'm allocating all of it except whatever I've already allocated. And how many am I splitting it among? And there's where this powerful count blank comes in, which is a lot like is blank, but lets you count them up. So if I count all of the blank values, there's one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. And I'm going to hit escape so I don't accidentally edit this formula that I'm trying to point at. That gives me how much to divide. And so here I have 60% already allocated, which means that I have 40% left to allocate, and I have 5 spaces to allocate it, so that's 8 spaces. So one thing that I did want to mention really quickly, and I'm glad I reminded myself of it by putting this in here, you'll notice that I put in a 0, and it treated that as an override value. Is blank, is empty, count blank, those all treat 0 and blank as different values. And that is usually what you actually want when it comes to the override pattern. The thing to watch out for is you might be tempted to write if input values is equal to an empty cell. And the messy bit there is that is equal to an empty cell, depending on the settings of Quantrix, may treat 0 as equal to that. So I highly recommend using either is blank or is empty. So that is a slightly more advanced version. And then I'm going to layer on top of that. I'm going to get slightly crazy. Oh, sorry. One point I did want to make. Suppose, as Brad says, you're allocating budget. You really want to stop at 100%, right? And there's nothing in this formula to prevent you from going over 100%. I've already allocated a whole lot here, but if I allocate another 90% here, then you'll see that it's cheerfully saying, well, that means that you have to somehow deallocate this much in these. And there are various ways that you can guard against that. You can put cell constraints on, you can put conditional formatting, things like that. But just be aware that it's a thing that you'll have to worry about if you want to use something like this in the real world. So moving on, suppose I've already done this. Suppose I've allocated my budget. My budget is none in January, 8 in February, 8 in March, 20 in April, 8 in May, 8 in June, etc. This is my existing budget. And then my actual numbers start coming in. I get whatever I don't know what I'm allocating here, but whatever I spent, let's say, in January. I get whatever I spent in February, and I want to adjust the remaining months while retaining the sort of relationship between these. And this was an example that I got from Lindsay, and I wanted to thank her for putting such an interesting idea into my head. So here's how I might do that. Again, I prepared this one earlier. So here we have a copy of the original estimate. That's just coming straight from here. And it's this line right here. And we can see that if I change this, it's just literally copied over. So I'm going to take that out. This is an input line. Maybe it's pulled from data import. Maybe it's just typed straight in there. This is just a simple subtraction. It's just how far off were my actuals from my budget. Oops, I didn't think I was spending anything in January, but I actually spent 10 whatever's carrots, I don't know. And then I want to know how that adjusts my budget. And so I'll talk about this formula in just a second, but the idea is that as my actuals come in, this part should be my actuals, and this part should be whatever this was adjusted by how much I actually had left available to allocate. So it's this adjusted by the sum of all of this. How much error do I have in total? And all of these happen to be high, but suppose one of them was low, it's the signed error, right? When I add these together, here I have a total of -9. And so I split that up among these, whatever, 8 months. And I adjust these numbers by, in this case, 1/8, because I have 8 left. So what does that look like? If this isn't starting to look familiar, that's too bad, because it's the thing I really want to hammer on. If is blank actuals. So if is blank actuals, all of these, then I want to do a calculation. That's these cells. If it's not blank, I just want to use it. I want to copy it down. And that, again, is the sort of fundamental override pattern. Then I take the original estimate, if I don't have an actuals available for me yet, and I adjust it by however much error I have left divided by however many empty places I have to distribute it. Very similar to the original equalizer. And so if I estimated high, you'll see that all these numbers go up as I have more available to spend. And if I estimated low, you'll see that all these numbers go down as I have more to spend. And I've prepared a simple little canvas here to show that this maintains my invariant. It will always be 100%, even as my actuals come in. So whatever happens here, the original estimate obviously added to 100, the actuals add to whatever the actuals are, because that I don't have any control of, and the result is 100. And I'll just show you really quickly that that is the world's simplest formula. I'm just adding these up. It's just convenient to have it in a separate matrix and tied together using a canvas. Let me see if there's anything else that I really wanted to talk about here. As I said, this is calculated values. You should, I recommend using this pattern for your import values. If you are importing from your company database or what have you, and you want to maintain a record of what actually happened in clear and precise, no nonsense terms, but you also want to step in and say, okay, but this was an anomalous value, and here's here's what would have been different in our projections if this had come in this way, or here's our adjusted thinking on this. Yes, we made this much money, so etc. Sorry, I got distracted by the chat there, and I will open it up to questions in just a moment. I did want to say that I intentionally picked examples here that, while it's a little bit complicated, that we are layering together an override and then another override, the actual math is totally simple, right? We're just going ahead and splitting things uniformly for this example. Yes, Rich, we will absolutely be making this available after the conference. But I think Steve mentioned somewhere there that something about weighting it. And yes, I was trying to keep things simple here. For instance, if what you wanted to do was take this as the shape of a curve and use a multiplicative weighting instead of a simple additive shifting, you absolutely could do that. The formula wouldn't be that much more complicated, and you can do whatever calculation is applicable to your use case. You can fit it to any curve you want. I just wanted to do something that I could explain in relatively few words. So I talked fairly quickly. I got through everything I was hoping to talk about, and I want to throw the floor open to questions. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I will be happy to try and answer them.
Thanks so much, Ben. Here's a quick question. Does this new functionality of retaining values without a formula replace the need for the override pattern, or is there a situation for each?
Great question, Brendan. And the answer is, I think both of these are really useful, really valuable. And no, I don't think that the override pattern is obsoleted by the ability to delete without clearing. The big thing that delete without clearing doesn't give you is that ability to handle dynamic changes, right? Even here, where I'm looking at this result, I could go back in and adjust my original equalizer. I could say, oh, actually, I want 10 there. And then when I go back to here, when I go back to here, that 10 is there. That 10 is then being adjusted by the sum of my estimation error to be this. So the ability to dynamically change, recalculate. Another great example would be, this is very flexible, this count blank. You're probably not going to add more months to your year, but this isn't the only category you might possibly be spreading across. And suppose you're spreading across regions and you add another region that you do business in, or you're spreading across employees and you add 7 more employees. If you have pre-populated it with a formula, when you add the new items, those are going to be blank, and the other ones are going to now be wrong if you were trying to split them evenly rather than assign them something random or assign them something uniform. And so being able to use this override pattern means that hypothetically, if I added a, October, all of these formulas still work. Everything is still functioning fine. It's doing a slightly weird thing. It's dividing into 13 months, etc. But it works. And so that to me is the real value of the of the override pattern. I did want to mention something really quick that Brad probably knows but didn't think to mention. Suppose I say that I want it to equal 5 and I want to delete without clearing. Again, this is a 22.2 feature. It's not available in current Quantrix, but will be very soon. He showed you the right click, but that's not how I use it. I hold down Control and press delete, and it will do that for you. So for all power users out there, that's your shortcut. Let me see. So Franz asked, how do you know what percentage you have in actual? And the answer is that I added a summary. So the percentage in actual here is 107 because I've added up all of the actual percentages. Hopefully that answers that question. Let's see. Steve makes the assertion that isEmptyList is used with select. He's absolutely right. IsEmptyList is a different function, which people may already be aware of, that instead of saying, is this an empty value, it says, is this a list with no things in it? And the easiest way to show that off is to use the list function, right? So is this an empty list? No, it has 3 things in it. However, if I do that, then the answer is yes. 1 is yes, true. Is this list of no things an empty list? And it may be easier to understand if I say, or maybe not, who knows? I didn't mean to type alcohol by volume there, but there you have it. So if I look up A, then the answer is no, it is not an empty list. I looked up A, I found the value 1, I returned a list of size 1. But if I look up the value Q, it's not in there. So yes, this select returned an empty list. Is that what you're referring to there, Steve? It's true, Rich. I don't know why I have accidentally turned off my formula syntax highlighting. Great. Okay, well, I think we've been through the questions. I appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully that some piece of that is useful to at least some of the guests, and if not, you found it interesting. Thank you all for your interesting questions, and I will throw it back to Brandon.